Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 20th of March, 2026, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me by video link today are Patrick Henningsen and Basil Valentine. Later in the programme, Heiko Koo is going to be joining us to take another look at Palantir and the pressures building to have them dropped from the NHS contract. We're going to be covering the release of the Gaza Tribunal report, claims of EU preparation for war with the United States over Greenland, and Ofcom has been demanding money with menaces from foreign companies again. But we're going to begin today with Patrick and the latest on Iran. Patrick, and well, it is day 21.
Yeah, it is amazing that we're now 3 weeks into this war that we were told by the Trump administration, by their allies, by Israel, that this would be over very quickly. It would be days that would topple the regime. Well, here we are 3 weeks later, and plans are afoot to extend it for many weeks more. Nobody quite knows what to expect here. So the main development this week, Mike, has been the war entering a new phase. Israel struck the world's largest gas field. This is the South Pars gas field, shared by the Iranians and the Qataris, that supplies the world with a massive percentage of its natural gas and LNG. Israel had the bright idea to attack it. And Iran said in advance what they would do if that happened. They would attack all of the Gulf oil and gas infrastructure facilities around, in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, etc., UAE. And guess what? That's exactly what the Iranians are doing. And now the United States, the Europeans are throwing their hands in the air saying, wait, don't do that. Don't do that. This is going to destroy the global economy. This is going to create a massive inflation spike for everything around the world. Will these countries in the West be able to withstand that level of shock? But I think it's a bit too late for that. So things have developed. It also conceivably could drag Turkey into this conflict a bit more, because they're heavily reliant on this natural gas from this South Pars gas field here. So, and this is a story we'll bring up on screen here, Middle East Research and Information Project, a website which I follow. The war has crossed boundaries, perspectives on Iran and the region under siege. So this is now a regional war. Effectively, it was before, but now we're getting further down that road. So that's a massive risk, I think, for the rest of the world. And invariably, Mike, great powers will be drawn in now to secure their interests. This is how world wars begin. Certainly, this is how the Second World War began. So this talk right now that this can be contained, this is just a local conflict that they can contain, this is just not credible. It's not a credible argument at the moment here. And in terms of this, how things could cascade regionally, I want to put this report up on screen from 21st Century Wire. Again, amazing work by Freddie Ponton. Inside the Caucasus drone corridor, fueling tensions with Iran. Now we're talking about Azerbaijan. There is evidence that the U.S. and the Israelis are, again, using Azerbaijan as a corridor to attack Iran. Iranian naval ships have been hit in the Caspian Sea, and now Armenia as well looks like it could be engaged. This is an incredibly well-researched piece, and it just shows you the level of the drone technology that's being used, how it's being used to attack Iran, what types of drones, which countries produce these drones. All of that data is in this excellent research piece at 21stcenturywire.com. Again, Freddie Ponton doing great work. Incredible work, in fact. Now, another stage, Mike, is a stage of brutality that this conflict has gone into. The Israelis, as you know, have a policy of targeted assassinations. They have attacked and killed Iran's supreme leader in the opening days of this war, and now the Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz, we'll bring him up on screen here. A new doctrine has now come into play. Okay, this is after they have assassinated this week Ali Larijani. This is the head of the security and potential future leader of the country. But this is one of the most, I think, moderates in terms of ability to negotiate. Israelis are bragging that they killed him this week, as well as the intelligence chief. And this is what Israel Katz is saying. No one in Iran has immunity, and everyone is a target. And he goes on to say, Iranian intelligence minister Khatib was killed. We will continue to eliminate and hunt them down. He's talking about every Iranian official Israel is claiming, and the United States is backing this up, that they're terrorists. So if they're killing the supreme leader, they're now targeting his son. So anybody, and this could include at some point the president, members of parliament, and they're just going to hunt them down one by one. So anybody who holds any office, high office in Iran, is potentially going to be targeted and marked for killing, assassination by Israel. This is total warfare. Okay, there is no coming back from this. So if Israel is not restrained, this is all but guaranteeing we're going to see a bloody conflict that will not end in negotiations, that will only end on the battlefield, and who knows how many dead civilians that's going to entail. That's what Israel, that's the gauntlet they have laid down here. Where's the United States? Where are the British on this? Where are the Europeans? Is anybody going to weigh in and somehow draw this thing to some kind of a situation where parties can negotiate or talk to each other? It doesn't look likely.
We had a little bit of video there, Patrick.
Yes, this is the video from Israel Katz, but this is from, well, listen closely. He's saying it here.
אחרי הסיכולים העוצמתיים של בכירי המשטר, מנהיג איראן בפועל לריג'ני וראש ארגון רצח בעם, הבסיג' סולימני, חוסל הלילה גם שר המודיעין האיראני חטיב, שהיה ממונה על מערך הרצח והדיכוי הפנימי של המשטר באיראן ועל קידום איומים חיצוניים מול ישראל ומדינות האזור. מדיניות ישראל ברורה וחד משמעית. אין לאף אחד באיראן חסינות וכולם על הכוונת. ראש הממשלה בנימין נתניהו ואני הסמכנו את צה"ל לסכל כל בכיר איראני שנסגר עליו מעגל מודיעיני ומבצעי ללא צורך בקבלת אישור נוסף. נמשיך לסכל ולצוד את כולם. גם במהלך היום הזה צפויות הפתעות משמעותיות בכלל הזירות שעלו מדרגה את המלחמה שאנחנו מנהלים מול איראן והחיזבאללה בלבנון.
So total escalation, including Lebanon as well. That's where we're at.
Absolutely. But it's not going all the United States way anyway, or at least. So if we put this on screen, this is an F-35, apparently with a missile heading towards it. So this fighter was forced to divert from its combat mission over Iran and make an emergency landing at an undisclosed U.S. airbase in the Middle East. The story broke yesterday and was eventually confirmed by the Pentagon, although not fully. US officials have acknowledged the aircraft was hit by what is believed to be Iranian fire. That's how they're describing it. The pilot survived and is reported to be in a stable condition in hospital. This is the first F-35 shot down during a combat mission. Iran claimed that it successfully struck the aircraft using its air defense systems, and that's why even a partial hit is significant. Because if Iran, I'm now quoting from a comment online, by the way, if Iranian air defenses were able to track and strike an F-35, it could suggest improvements in detection systems or exploitation of gaps in US operations. It also challenges the perception that stealth aircraft can operate in Iran with impunity. So that was a quote that was online and fairly good analysis. Now, that's 16 US aircraft have been lost since the war began. That's including multiple Reaper drones shot down by Iranian defenses. Of course, the 3 F-15 fighters that were mistakenly shot down, allegedly by Kuwaiti air defenses, if that's what it was, and also the KC-35 refueling aircraft, which crashed in western Iraq, killing all 6 personnel on board. And now that latter one was officially, at least, a mid-air collision, although Brian Gerrish, at least, absolutely is skeptical of that claim. We'll talk about more on that on Extra. But Patrick, I just wonder if you've got any thoughts on this, because obviously this is the first time an F-35 has been shot down in combat, and it definitely demonstrates that it is not immune from this kind of attack.
Well, the Iranians have been saying that they have radar systems, and it has been shown that they are able to detect with their own proprietary systems, they're able to detect stealth aircraft. And once a lock has been achieved, then that aircraft has to disengage and then mission aborted. Otherwise, they can be targeted up to a range of 500 miles. So, and if you think about the combat distance, Mike, of what it takes to fly a mission, the limitations of an F-35, the longer the radar perimeter for detection, the less likely they can carry out missions without putting the pilot and the plane at risk.
Okay, Patrick, what's been going on in the United States? Has it been, we've obviously heard in the last couple of days some pushback with at least one resignation, but what's Tulsi Gabbard been saying?
Well, this is the biggest story right now in the United States. They just had the House hearing on national security threats. So you can see this. There's the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, next to John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, Kash Patel as well, FBI director. So Tulsi Gabbard was really, her feet were put to the fire because her office basically, Congress and Senate lawmakers are saying, there's no evidence of an imminent threat that Iran was going to attack. Did your office, Tulsi, have any evidence of this? And here, you can watch this dramatic exchange for yourself. I mean, this is just an incredibly important, I think, exchange right here between the senator from Georgia, John Ossoff, and Tulsi Gabbard, Trump's DNI. But watch.
Under the law, you are responsible for providing national intelligence to the president, correct?
Yes.
And to the heads of executive branch departments and agencies, yes?
Yes.
And to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and senior military commanders?
Across the IC, yes.
And to the Senate and the House and relevant committees, correct?
Yes.
And the law states that the national intelligence you provide to Congress, quote, should be timely, objective, and independent of political considerations, correct?
Yes.
And you noted in your opening statement you're here fulfilling a statutory responsibility and that your testimony, quote, represents the IC's assessment of threats,
That's right.
Correct? That opening statement, as submitted to the committee in advance of this hearing, stated that as a result of last summer's airstrikes, quote, Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated, end quote, correct?
That's right.
And is that in fact the assessment of the intelligence community?
Yes.
So the assessment of the intelligence community is that Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated by last summer's airstrikes.
Yes.
And the opening statement you submitted to the committee last night also stated, quote, there has been no effort since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability, end quote, correct?
That's right.
And that's the assessment of the intelligence community.
Yes.
The White House stated on March 1st of this year that this war was launched and was, quote, a military campaign to eliminate the imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, end quote. That's a statement from the White House. Quote, the imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime. Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was an imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime?
The intelligence community assessed that Iran maintained the intention to rebuild and to continue to grow their nuclear enrichment capability.
Was it the assessment of the intelligence community that there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime, yes or no?
Senator, the only person who can determine what is and is not an imminent threat is the president.
False. This is the worldwide threats hearing where you present to Congress national intelligence, timely, objective, and independent of political considerations. You've stated today that the intelligence community's assessment is that Iran's nuclear enrichment program was obliterated and that, quote, there had been no efforts since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. Was it the intelligence community's assessment that nevertheless, despite this obliteration, there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime? Yes or no?
It is not the intelligence community's responsibility to determine what is and is not an imminent threat.
Okay.
That is up to the president based on a volume of information
it is precisely
that he receives.
It is precisely your responsibility to determine what constitutes a threat to the United States. This is the worldwide threats hearing where, as you noted in your opening testimony, quote, you represent the IC's assessment of threats. You are here to represent the IC's assessment of threats. That's a quote from your own opening statement. And so my question is, as you're here to present the IC's assessment of threats, was it the assessment of the intelligence community that, as the White House claimed on March 1st, there was a, quote, imminent nuclear threat posed by the Iranian regime? Yes or no?
Once again, Senator, the intelligence community has provided the inputs that make up this annual threat assessment.
You won't answer the
It is
question.
the nature of the imminent threat that the president has to make that determination based on a collection and volume
You're here
of
to be
information and
timely.
intelligence that he is provided with.
You're here to be timely, objective, and independent of political considerations.
Exactly what I'm doing.
No, you're evading a question because to provide a candid response to the committee would contradict a statement from the White House.
Wow. So that was repeated, Mike, 3 times by other senators during this. So Tulsi really got it during these hearings here. So basically, she's saying that Donald Trump can declare an imminent threat no matter what the intelligence community says. So what's the point of having an intelligence assessment? That's what they're saying here. And just to back this up on the British side here, this is Jonathan Powell. He is a UK security advisor here. He attended the U.S.-Iranian talks, and he can confirm there was a deal on the table. Iran was making massive concessions. And again, if you back that up with the U.S. intelligence community's own assessment that they weren't pursuing a nuclear weapon, they had no intention of doing that. So that's the gist of it. Now, at the same time, a massive resignation, the first major resignation here, the counterterrorism chief, his name is Joe Kent. He resigned very publicly right before this hearing here. And he's saying, after much reflection, I've decided to resign as director of National Counterterrorism Center. He works for Tulsi Gabbard. This is in her department here. And he says, I cannot in good conscience support an ongoing war in Iran. Iran poses no imminent threat to our nation. And it's clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel, and it's a powerful American lobby. So, I mean, this has sent massive shockwaves right through the system in the U.S., and it really makes Tulsi Gabbard look like she's running cover for an illegal war that's been waged by the White House and Israel. And now this is the conversation that's now elevated in America. Here is Joe Kent. He's doing media interviews now, and he's being attacked by Fox. Everybody's attacking him, his wife, etc. So here he is, and this is the first of 2 clips, but here he is basically framing that you have a serious problem in Washington regarding intelligence, especially as it pertains to Iran. But listen closely.
So imminent threat, you're saying that there was no intelligence that you saw with the highest level clearance, obviously involved in this conversation, that showed an imminent threat from Iran to the United States?
No, unless we took certain actions, unless we came after them in a way that they thought threatened the regime. Then we basically knew what they were going to do.
Well, okay,
what
but
they're doing.
Right, of course.
Right, but like any country. So if you attack any country, we know that they're going to have a reaction.
We face an imminent threat once we attack you.
Fantastic. Yeah, exactly. But there was no intelligence that said, hey, on whatever day it was, March 1st, the Iranians are going to launch this big sneak attack. They're going to do some kind of a 9/11 Pearl Harbor, et cetera. They're going to attack one of our bases. There was none of that intelligence. Again, back to what we know about the Iranians, they're very, very deliberate with the escalation ladder.
So what you have here is another fake WMD, another war waged with a fake WMD claim by the U.S. government. And he goes on to make a number of excellent points, but let's look at his letter real quick. The next point is perhaps more explosive. We take a closer look at that, and specifically, we're going to look at this section here, and we'll just blow that up a little bit more. There we are. Early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform. He's talking to the president in this resignation letter here. Sowed pro-war sentiments, encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you, the president, into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States and that you should strike now. There was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie. And this is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. We cannot make this mistake again. Now, just to really pad out that, listen to what he says now about how Israel has been injecting fake intelligence into the U.S. system, and this is what Tulsi Gabbard's job is meant to prevent, yet Tulsi seems to be a gatekeeper for what he's about to explain here. But listen to this. This is explosive.
And just to be clear, there was no intelligence that showed an imminent threat. There was no intelligence that showed they were on the cusp of building a nuclear weapon. There was no intelligence, indeed, that showed they were trying to build a nuclear weapon. And nobody said, I've seen it, but you haven't. It exists, but you just haven't seen it. Did you ever hear anybody say there is intel that shows this?
I did not know, but I know how this works. I know the Israeli officials, some in intelligence, some in government, will come to U.S. government officials, and they will say all kinds of things that we know from our intelligence just simply isn't true. And they'll say, hey, I'm giving you a preview. It's not in intelligence channels yet, but here's what's going to happen. And that doesn't usually come to
Wait a second. I mean, I thought that U.S. policymakers made their decisions on the basis of intelligence collected and or vetted by our intelligence. That's why we have intelligence agencies that soak up hundreds of billions a year. But you're saying that Israeli officials short-circuited the entire U.S. government and just went right to American policymakers and said, it doesn't matter what your country says, here's what we know? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, usually they're pretty slick, and they'll say, hey, this isn't in intelligence channels yet because it's going to take some time to get there. And here they're on the cusp of building a bomb. They're going to, I don't know, you pick your topic. A lot of times they'll sample different things until they find what sticks. But in general, the narrative about, they're going to do a preemptive attack, or really just they're going to build a nuclear weapon. And if we don't stop them now, they're going to build a nuclear weapon. And enrichment is the pathway to that. They're going to continue enriching at whatever percent. Enrichment became the narrative. And so that hung up and that short-circuited and really sabotaged the entire negotiations, because the Iranians basically said, like, we're not going to negotiate if the whole starting point is no enrichment. And again, that had nothing to do with a nuclear weapon, and the Iranians essentially agreed to that. So the Israelis came in, they moved that red line, and they would do a lot to say, like, oh, they're enriching, and you know what that means? That means in X amount of time they could have a nuclear bomb. You have to ask now. And then the way the ecosystem would work is that the talking heads on TV, your Mark Levins, Sean Hannity's, et cetera, they would say basically the exact same thing that night on TV, or there would be a piece written in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, that would say something very, very similar. Yet, if you looked in classified intelligence, we didn't see any of that.
What Joe Kent's talking about is a conspiracy. They're hitting policymakers, they're hitting the White House, and they're also hitting the media at exactly the same time to create the impression of a consensus about something that's people are claiming to be happening, but isn't actually happening. So, I mean, this is just absolutely incredible here. And there's just so many examples that have come out this week, Mike, including this one that go against all the claims that are being made by Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump, and Marco Rubio. Trump was warned, it's confirmed, by multiple sources, of a likely Iranian retaliation on Gulf allies if there's any attacks on Iran's energy infrastructure, that there would be retaliation, but also that they would retaliate against U.S. bases. And that's exactly what happened. So the White House is saying that, well, we had no idea of foreseeing that Iran would attack U.S. bases. We didn't have any intelligence. Well, that's not true. They absolutely did. So, I mean, it's just one thing after another. Now, here's the last thing, and I have to thank the Gray Zone for this report. And this shows you how bad the fake intelligence has infected Washington here, how Israel and the FBI manipulated assassination plots to goad Trump into the Iran war. So, and we'll break this down a little bit here, but Max Blumenthal wrote this piece. Officials have yet to produce any evidence that Iran played a role in either of these alleged attempts on Trump's life. Yet, since those fateful events, Israel-aligned Trump advisors, Israeli intelligence, Prime Minister Netanyahu himself have gone to extreme lengths to order to make this tied to Tehran, these assassination plots. More shocking still is the fact that, get this, the FBI has manufactured a series of assassination plots, successfully convincing Trump that Iran was hunting him on U.S. soil with highly sophisticated teams of hitmen. All of this was fabricated. In fact, this last fake plot is all basically has been ginned up using FBI informants. Okay, so now we have the details of this. And this includes ties to, although it needs more analysis, to what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, the assassination attempt on Trump during the 2024 campaign. So a lot of this is shrouded in sort of nebulous bureaucracy by the FBI in this case, but this is just absolutely stunning, this revelation here. Excellent report by Max Blumenthal at the Gray Zone, but it just shows you how corrupt this is. And it's not the first time, Mike, that we've seen this. If you read Trevor Aronson's Terror Factory, you'll see just reams of these fake terror plots on U.S. soil that are used to basically bolster whatever the administration's policies are and extract public relations currency from it.
Thank you for that, Patrick. Now, let's move on then to Palantir. Now, in Wednesday's program, we showed this article here. It beggars belief. MOD sources warn Palantir's role at the heart of government is a threat to UK's security. Now, this, of course, is adding some momentum to the campaign to get Palantir out of the NHS. But Basil, let me welcome you to the program first. Just give us the latest on this, and also tell us about the graphic that was attached to that particular article covering the companies that don't have shareholdings in Palantir.
Hello, Mike. Great to be with you. We'll be joined in a couple of minutes by Heiko Koo, the academic, who is one of the lead campaigners to get all Palantir contracts with the British government cancelled because this farrago continues to mushroom. Yes, it turns out that large British pension companies are invested in Palantir. First of all, Legal and General, who provide pensions for, amongst others, Tesco and some of Britain's other biggest corporate employers. They've got about 1.6 billion invested in Palantir, apparently. So, this is, really starting to undermine the company's credibility and indeed the credibility of those companies that support it. Something else really very disturbing has come to light. And this is a clip of Yanis Varoufakis, the former Greek finance minister, speaking to Rania Khalek a few days ago about how intelligence gathered, data gathered from atrocities taking place in Gaza is going to be reworked and used as a model for aspects of the NHS. This really is very ghoulish stuff, particularly when you bear in mind company chairman Peter Thiel's obsession with the Antichrist. He's in Rome giving lectures about the Antichrist, much to the consternation of the Vatican. But let's see this clip of Yanis Varoufakis, who still, of course, operates at a high level. And this is really off the charts.
I was sitting next to a Palantir scientist, engineer, whatever you might call them, during a dinner. And the conversation with other people around the table was about Gaza. And this gentleman next to me suddenly started experiencing a kind of excitement, having heard the word Gaza. I don't think he listened to what the conversation was. He was talking to somebody else. And he said, the Gaza was fantastic for us. He meant Palantir. And I said, yeah, well, what? Tens of thousands of children being maimed and killed was fantastic. He said, no, that was terrible. But, and he pointed at my phone, which was sitting on the table, of course, idle. And he said, your phone now is useless to me because it's not moving. It's not going anywhere. If it's stationary, it doesn't produce data. But if you bombard a densely populated area, people with their phones run around a lot. They produce a lot of data. They pick up a phone, they call their relatives, they try to find out if their loved ones are maimed or dead or alive or whatever. And we train, that's what he said, we train our AI programs on this wealth of data that came out of Gaza in circumstances that create panic. And I said, yeah, okay, can you explain to me what did you get out of that? He said, well, we just sold a program, an AI program, to the British National Health Service for £1 billion. And then I found out that it was done through the Tony Blair Institute, right? Involving Tony Blair's son, to the National Health Service in Britain. And what they're going to be using this program that was trained on the death and destruction of people in Gaza, what is trained to do is to help organize British hospitals in cases of emergencies when nurses and doctors and so on panic. So you can see this is the first time in human history that you don't simply have the arms trade, where arms dealers make a lot of money from selling weapons that kill people. No, here the actual killing of the people, the people running around injured without buying anything. Their movements, their screams, their agony, their pain is training AI, which then allows people like the gentleman who's sitting next to me through the Tony Blair Institute to sell to a national public health service.
Heiko Koo joins us now from outside Palantir's headquarters in Soho Square in London. Heiko, welcome to the program. I don't know if you heard that clip of Yanis Varoufakis speaking there, or if you've seen it before.
Yeah, I did see it a few days ago. It's typical of the type of operations of this company behind us. It's the global center for what can only be described as demonic types of control over AI. And it seems to me that these people, through their combination between money, intelligence agents, connections, artificial intelligence, have literally lost the plot completely and imagine that they're about to reform the entire planet based upon some kind of psychopathic ideal of total control over information in order to facilitate a few elite vanguard leaders, Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, and a few others around, and Lewis Mosley they've got here in London, who will administer the world. That's the type of mindset these people live in.
I find it absolutely extraordinary that human suffering is being reworked into something for a health service. I mean, the British public are completely unaware of this. If they weren't, there would be. If they were to be aware of it, would naturally be appalled. Isn't even strong enough language. I think we really need to amplify this, Heiko, and make it central to the campaign to get all their contracts cancelled, every single one.
I mean, I think it's not quite true that suffering hasn't been used in that way. The First World War was used to generate a lot of information about healthcare provision and amputations and making prosthetic equipment and all this sort of thing. So warfare has often kind of been used in this way. The key transition point here is the whole COVID saga. When they closed down the entire planet, this company raced around Britain and America, introducing jabs as rapidly as possible with experimental vaccines that cause huge harm around the world. And this was, if you like, their launching pad to become the generic agent, to go-to agent for artificial intelligence across the board in public sector spheres. And the interesting thing is they didn't even operate as a genuinely capitalist company. For 10 years and more, they made no profits whatsoever. And only after massive government contracts, in other words, state subsidies, do they end up finally being in a position where they can be the central lever of international, global surveillance, monitoring, and slaughter around the world. That's the game they're playing. And they're combining all these different elements, military, data as a generic force within government, efficiency, healthcare, biology and DNA and all the rest of it, which all these major corporations are interested in. And so it's a totalistic vision of controlling the world through data.
No surprise that Tony Blair's name popped up in that report, and that the Tony Blair Institute may have been instrumental in getting Palantir that contract. But the British government's obsession with this company goes all the way back to 2016 and Michael Gove, who paved the way for some of the first contracts. Why is it that the UK government is obsessed with handing all these contracts to a company tied to Epstein? He was an early investor, and with this, ghoulish view of the human future, Heiko.
I think you basically have to look at Israel and the associations between Israel and the Zionist entity and its allies and its influence to understand why such corporations, which weren't making profit, should have been closed down years ago, should have gone bankrupt years ago, why they are still operational and how they became so influential and powerful around the world. It's all interconnected with the role of Israel around the world and its influence around the world. And of course, that once you tie those threads together, that connects together Epstein, that connects together Mandelson, that connects together Tony Blair, that connects together. And of course, the man they've got, this man now talking about the Antichrist, Peter Thiel, was the main sponsor. He created J.D. Vance. And J.D. Vance is supposed to be the man who takes over after Donald Trump. And so here you see this man who talks about the Antichrist is trying to manufacture one.
Patrick, would you like to ask Heiko a question?
I just think, Heiko, what can the public do? How can they support, what you're doing out there? I know that a lot of you have been very dedicated to this issue here. Are more people getting involved and becoming aware of what's going on here?
It's something I've had in my mind for a year and more, but to be honest with you, I was scared to do it because for a long time, if you're on your own and you start a protest against Palantir, then you're asking for big trouble. I saw that picture, the video yesterday of Steve Sweeney being blown up, a bomb dropping right behind him. That's almost certainly a Palantir type operation. And therefore I was a little bit concerned about it. But nevertheless, because the tide seems to have turned after the last release of the Epstein files and the connection between Peter Mandelson, Keir Starmer and Palantir behind us was clearly established, I think they're on the back foot. And the Israelis are also on the back foot. So if there's any time to take them on and destroy their power, it is now. And I think that over the summer, the good thing about them making the mistake of planting themselves in Soho Square is this is a big square. I'll just show you around in case for the viewers who don't know. It's quite a big square. It's very popular in the summertime. And it's a square which is in the centre of London's entertainment district. And so there will be hundreds of thousands of people passing through here on a regular basis. And we're making music. We want to have a dance. We want to create an atmosphere of a festival type feeling that people question how AI has ended up not only taking away the jobs in this area, which is the main media, arts and music area, but also in threatening the lives of the whole of humanity and the freedom of the whole of humanity. And it's not even hidden by them. They've openly declared these things. They are making war on humanity itself. And therefore, I think this can become a beating heart of resistance, almost like a Woodstock, if you like, over the next year or so. And Palantir is sensitive to this. They had protests in Denver and they closed their office in Denver and moved to Florida only last month. So no, we don't want them to close down here and move somewhere else. We want to shut them down completely. So we're having protests here every Thursday, 4 o'clock. We're having speak outs at Speaker's Corner. But really, it's going to take off in the summertime, and it's gradually taking off.
That's great to hear. And if people can't make it to Soho Square, where else can they find out about the campaign, Heiko?
Well, I'm posting most of the stuff on my own Substack. So it's Heiko, HEIKOKHOO.substack.com. That's where I'm posting stuff. And there'll be lots of new songs on there. I've been making songs, and they're really, I'd say they're very cool.
Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us, Heiko. Back to you, Mike.
Thank you, Basil. Thank you, Heiko. And thanks, Patrick, as well. Now, Patrick, let's come back to you then. And the question of Israel versus Russia.
Well, this is really along the line of the Palantir story here. We're talking about AI and how this has been used on the battlefield here, but not just that, internationally here. Another great piece by the Gray Zone. This is by Wyatt Reed. Now, this is interesting. This is a military spokesperson from Israel. IDF threatens elimination for Russian leaders who wish Israel ill. Now, that's incredible. Let's look at that a little bit closer. A spokesperson from the IDF has drawn outrage in Moscow after threatening that Russian authorities who wish Israel ill could be subject to elimination, suggesting that Israel could hack into Russia closed-circuit television cameras around the capital to identify and track targets. And just further on this, asked by a journalist with one of the Russian radio broadcasters here regarding this threat here in Israel, do they actually have access to Russian traffic cameras and CCTV networks here? And the response here was they declined to answer, but said Khamenei's, the Iranian leader's elimination shows our capabilities are serious. No one who wishes us harm will be left aside, is what she says here. And MASH, this is I think this is a Middle Eastern media outlet or a Russian tech outlet here, but they revealed that the Israeli software firm BriefCam has been used in Russia by private providers since 2010s, is founded by Israel's Hebrew University. BriefCam uses AI to let users review hours of video in minutes and make their videos searchable, actionable, quantifiable using AI tools. Here are some of the firms, some big names, as an example of who is integrated with BriefCam here. You got Salient, Bosch, Verint, among others here that have fully integrated and using BriefCam systems here. So this is an Israeli company, and the IDF threatening to weaponize this technology here. And just finally, to go back, this was developed originally by Israel's Ministry of Housing Construction to safeguard illegal settlements in occupied East Jerusalem here. And the governments who are using this around the world, including the United Kingdom and many others listed here. And just to note, a French court found that the government's use in France of BriefCam was illegal, citing multiple violations of French and European privacy laws here. Yet it's being used all over Europe, all over Asia, North America, and even places like the United Arab Emirates as well. So, I mean, that just kind of it really adds to what Basil and Heiko were talking about the size and scope of this network and how these tech companies are effectively Trojan horses. And now it's being weaponized. Should people be taking these threats seriously? I'm certain Moscow will be looking at this very closely.
Well, Moscow should be taking it very seriously. Everybody in the West should be taking it very seriously as well, because we've been trying to bang this drum for quite some time, Patrick, to make the point that the Western tech industry has Israel totally embedded in just about everywhere. And, this is a major concern for people, or it should be. So we'll talk about that and extra as well. But look, let's move on and remind everybody that if you do like what we do, we need your support, your ongoing financial support. If you can support us financially, you can get details on the UK Column website. If your income doesn't support that, then please do at least share this program, any other UK Column content you find interesting, because that helps us defeat the censorship regime in this country and in other countries as well. Tonight at 7 p.m, Jerm is discussing who benefits from the war against Iran. Join him at 7 for that. And Carl will be on at 9. And the headline, or the title for that, is Trump's humiliation, begging China to save him from Iran war disaster. So 2 programs to watch tonight. Now, Basil, let me bring you back to the program again. And the Gaza Tribunal has issued its report. Just tell everybody what that is, who's behind it, and what the report says.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, I mean, although you'd hardly know it from the scant reporting in the corporate syndicate press, the independent Gaza tribunal published its findings this week. It heard testimony from witnesses, including journalists, medics, academics, survivors, international law experts, and whistleblowers, doing a job that should really have been undertaken by the Crown Prosecution Service. But of course, they've been preoccupied with arresting elderly clergymen and peace campaigners holding pieces of paper. The aim of the tribunal was to uncover the full scale of British complicity in genocide, and it concluded that the British government failed in its fundamental obligation to prevent genocide as per the Geneva Convention, and further that Britain has, and I quote, been complicit in atrocity crimes and in some instances actively participated in them. The co-author, Shad Hamouri, warned that humanity has crossed a red line of genocide, accusing top UK officials of lying, manipulating the law, and protecting the interests of foreign governments and big businesses, not the British public. The former Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, co-authored the report, and he said that the tribunal aimed to serve as a landmark contribution to the campaign for justice and as a historical repository of evidence for generations to come. He went on to highlight Britain's strategic role, noting that Britain, although not the biggest arms contributor to Israel, is nevertheless a crucial part of it, partly because of the RAF base in Akrotiri, the sharing of intelligence information, and because of the way the US has a significant military presence in Britain, one, of course, that it's using as I speak to load up the B-52s to bomb Iran. This whole process, he went on, has eroded Britain's standing in the world, eroded our commitment to international law, to the United Nations, to human rights, to international justice through the ICC and the ICJ. So, of course, the atrocities haven't finished either, have they? It turns out that we're going to hear in a minute about Steve Sweeney, the rocket that landed within a few feet of him, causing him injury in Lebanon, it's believed may be made by Rafael, a company with British operation, which is headed up by Lord Hutton, a Labour peer. And of course, the spy flights include the one that was in the air when the World Kitchen British aid workers, James Kirby, James Henderson and John Chapman, were murdered in Gaza in April 2024. The Ministry of Defence holds video surveillance from that day, but is refusing to publish it. And of course, we don't know whether Palantir software played a part in that particular atrocity.
And Basil, Germany has decided to withdraw legal backing for Israel in the ICJ case.
Yeah, this is significant. Germany has been one of Israel's staunchest supporters throughout the genocide, but they appear to have had some sort of change of heart because they've withdrawn their support, as it says on the slide, for Israel from the case. So that significantly weakens the Israeli side because they were the only major European country doing so. It'll now be USA and Israel versus the rest of the world.
Thank you for that, Basil. Now, Patrick, both Basil and Heiko have mentioned Steve Sweeney, so just introduce the clip because we're going to show what happened to him.
Well, this is a British journalist, I might add. Yes, he works for RT International. He is the station chief there, lead correspondent in Beirut, Lebanon. Very important location for international news. He's a war correspondent here. Watch what happened while he was filing one of his recent reports about a bridge collapse in southern Lebanon.
Further rocket attacks were reported against Nahariya and admitted.
Not just a random shell falling there, I can assure you here. Steve Sweeney took to social media. He has sustained injuries here. Today, he says, Israel tried to kill me in a targeted airstrike in southern Lebanon as I was reporting on the targeting of bridges and the forced displacement of 1 million people, an ethnic cleansing operation on a larger scale than the Nakba. He's talking about the ethnic cleansing of Palestine by Israelis in 1947 and 48 here. So he says, no doubt this was deliberate, according to him here. Now, Steve Sweeney is recovering from his injuries here. Here he is basically explaining what happened and also what happened to him, more importantly, but he really puts this into a harrowing perspective. Here he is.
I guess so. Yeah, well, you've probably all seen the footage of the airstrike that took place in Sur district as we were reporting on the destruction of a bridge. We've been treated in hospital for our injuries. I had a shrapnel wound in my arm, deeply embedded in the muscle here. That's been taken out, and here it is in this pot here. But what I do want to say is that this was a deliberate, targeted attack on journalists. There's no mistake about it. This was an Israeli precision strike from a fighter jet. What we were doing was we were reporting on the attacks on bridges, which is effectively severing South Lebanon from the rest of the country. 1 million people now internally displaced. This is the real story. It's not about us coming under attack as journalists. What we're seeing now and what we were reporting on is this plan for Israel to ethnically cleanse the south of Lebanon. This is without doubt an attack. This is on the scale or bigger than the scale of the Nakba. This is the forced displacement of 1 million people, which remains a war crime. And also we have to say that attacking journalists is a war crime. Attacking civilian infrastructure is a war crime. But if they think that they're going to silence us, if they think that we're going to stay out of the field, they're very, very much mistaken.
Yeah, and props to Steve Sweeney. Very brave and tremendous, hugely professional as well in his conduct, and his statement there, I think, says it all. But, I would say, guys, and maybe Basil has more information on this, but the targeting of journalists is a little bit of a problem regarding Israel in the last couple of years.
Well, not just regarding Israel, but let's just put the British government's position on the targeting of journalists on screen here. This was a statement made in the United Nations. We must act to protect independent journalism. More journalists were killed last year than in any other year since the Committee to Protect Journalists began collecting data, making it the deadliest year on record. This is Letitia Lunan, the UK mission to the United Nations, saying this last year. And she said the UK remains a committed advocate for journalist safety and protection as a co-founder of the Media Freedom Coalition. So, Basil, my question to you is, very briefly, what has the British government said about this incident? Because it seems to me they're pretty silent on it.
Nothing is the short answer. Declassified have asked them to comment. They've refused to do so. They've also not commented on the 270-odd journalists murdered in Gaza, more than in World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Bosnian War combined. So that, obviously speaks to the deliberate targeting of journalists. Steve Sweeney, lucky to escape with his life.
Absolutely, and continued absolute hypocrisy from the UK regime. Okay, let's move on then to Denmark and Greenland in particular. So according to this article from DR, effectively the Danish equivalent of the BBC, Denmark was preparing for full-scale war with the United States over Greenland in January, alongside France, Germany, and the other Nordic regions. Now, elite troops and F-35 jets with live ammunition were sent, allegedly, and runways were to be blown up to prevent an invasion. DR said that Donald Trump's threats to seize Greenland were taken so seriously that wide-ranging preparations were made to forcibly resist the US invasion of Greenland. The Danish and French governments worked together to create a Northern European coalition. According to the article, this included sending blood to treat wounded soldiers, sending elite Danish troops and French Alpine troops to Greenland, preparing Greenland's runways for demolition, as said, and sending armed F-35 jets to patrol the skies. We wonder, would they do any better there than they seem to be doing in Iran at the moment. But anyway, this was apparently in response to the American attack on Venezuela on the 3rd of January, in which Maduro was abducted and taken to the United States. And so, Patrick, my question for you really is, what are we supposed to make of this? Because if you remember, there was much jocularity over the so-called, if we just put this on screen, so-called military exercise at the time, when Germans clearly found Greenland just a bit on the cold side and headed back home pretty much as soon as they arrived. So, I mean, are we supposed to take this report in Danish mainstream news in any way seriously?
I mean, this is just probably the equivalent of a sort of a NATO barroom brawl at the end of the day of exercises and training. It might as well have happened that way. But what I think it also shows is just I don't know how much they say they drew up these plans, Mike. How realistic is this? Is this more for the Danish domestic political audience that these types of reports are being elevated there? But realistically, I just don't ever see that as happening. But it really just shows you the whole artifice of NATO, of the edifice of NATO is disintegrating, and this is just a good example of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we're going to end today then with Ofcom. So let's bring them on screen because following an investigation, Ofcom has decided to fine 4chan, the online community, £450,000 for failing to comply with the UK's online age check requirements. Now they have to. Ofcom is saying that the platform now has to implement highly effective age assurance by the 2nd of April or face a daily penalty of £500. So this is what they had to say following an investigation and so on. They went on to say, we've also fined 4chan £50,000 for failing to assess the risk of people in the UK encountering illegal content on its site. This is fundamental, they say, to keeping users safe in order to put in place appropriate safety measures to protect people, especially children. Providers must first understand how harm could take place on their platforms. The company must now carry out a suitable and sufficient illegal content risk assessment by the 2nd of April or face daily penalty of £200. Additionally, they said, we have fined 4chan £20,000 for failing to specify in its terms of service how individuals are to be protected from illegal content, which they must now do by the 2nd of April or face a daily penalty of £100. So 4chan, for its part, basically yawned and stuck its fingers up at Ofcom and said, in the only country in which 4chan operates, the United States, it's breaking no law, and indeed its conduct is expressly protected by the First Amendment. Now, the BBC reports Ofcom is saying that the UK is setting new standards for online safety. Age checks and risk assessments are cornerstones of our laws, and we'll take robust enforcement action against firms that fall short. And I'm going to say this is complete nonsense, because producing a press release detailing a completely unenforceable so-called fine is not robust law enforcement. When they replied to me about this, they said this: if a provider fails to pay a fine, Ofcom is entitled to seek recovery of those penalties. Where appropriate, if a provider fails to comply with a requirement to implement age assurance, we can also seek a court order for business disruption measures, such as requiring payment providers or advertisers to withdraw their services from a platform, or requiring internet service providers to block a site in the UK. Now, the word entitled does not mean will or even can. They have no money for bringing cases like this in other countries. So these fines are effectively unenforceable. Now, they could add 4chan to the Great Firewall of Britain, which already blocks RT and Sputnik. But a VPN is going to sort that out for anyone so inclined. And so it's a waste of time. And as I've said many, many times already, none of this does anything to protect children who are by far most at risk from sites like Roblox, where adults are free to pose as children with no effort to restrict that behavior, apparently. And as we reported in January, at least one country, that's Egypt, has moved to do something about that by banning Roblox in that country. Now, Ofcom insists that age assurance is the way to protect children. Of course, it is absolutely the way to implement a form of digital ID. But Patrick, this whole claim that they are, fining companies in the United States or any other country in the world, and that those countries should pay any attention to that, is just ridiculous.
Yeah, especially look at what's the business model of 4chan. I mean, how important is Britain to its future? Are they just going to go the way of BitChute and other websites that basically just down-tooled operations and just given up on sort of trying to exist behind the Great British Firewall here? And note that 4chan is completely accessible, and you can get anything you want on 4chan in China. So, I mean, even China hasn't blocked 4chan. So probably because the Chinese government doesn't really view it as any kind of a threat, because most of the users are using it for like sharing anime, basically. I mean, so anyway, it's also the place where QAnon was launched, and how QAnon proliferated. The online conspiracy cult was 4chan. And very enthusiastic users included Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, by the way. I just thought I'd add that.
Well, yeah, indeed. So, 4chan perhaps deserving of some criticism in some ways, but we'll talk about that much more in extra as well. So if you are a UK Column member, stay on the live stream and we'll have some UK Column news extra for you in a few minutes' time. Otherwise, thank you very much to Patrick, Basil and Heiko for the contributions today, and for everybody that's watched. Don't forget Germ and Carl tonight, and have a great weekend. We will see you at 1 p.m. as usual on Monday. See you then. Bye-bye.